Hey, this is John Lee Dumas, the founder and host of Entrepreneurs on Fire. And if you're wanting to learn how to embrace change and navigate through disruption as a leader, then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend, Denis. He's prepared to ignite.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Denis Giannoutsas.
Hey, welcome to the show, Leadership is Changing. What we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Leaders everywhere confront similar obstacles because people are people, but everywhere we go, leaders are overwhelmed, disrupted, and under pressure. They run from email to email, meeting to meeting. Many leaders are not changing quick enough, which means they run the risk of becoming irrelevant and being left behind. The purpose of the show is taking our listeners' leadership to another level by finding their balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. I believe we don't have enough effective leaders in the world today, and if we can get the leaders to step up and lead change, then they can inspire real change. Hey listeners, it's now time to adapt in our fast-moving world, and I want to welcome you to today's session, this Mashup episode. I have three fantastic guests on this episode, and I'm going to get through that very soon indeed. But first of all, just want to say a big happy anniversary, of course. We celebrated this last week for the 1 year anniversary for the Leadership is Changing podcast. I want to thank so many people who've actually sent through messages of congratulations and of, just so much about how they're enjoying the podcast and so forth. So thank you so much for the messages that have come through in personal messages, phone calls, emails, and in person as well. So thank you so much. So the podcast is 1 year old now, right? So it's pretty cool, getting tremendous support. And if you didn't listen to the 1 year celebration, it's time to celebrate the 1 year anniversary of the podcast, which is episode 157, the episode before this one. Then I highly recommend you go ahead and do that. So yeah, you'll hear a little bit about my story again. Or if you go to episode 00, that's where you can hear a little bit about the story and why I started the podcast 1 year ago. Hey, listeners, if you haven't already checked out the Facebook group or the LinkedIn page, Leadership is Changing, go ahead and do that. We'd love to see you on that platform. And today's mashup is three wonderful guests. Barbara Gustavson, who is the owner of Discover Next Step and the podcast host of Inner Bold. 105 episode is Bengu Altinordu. She's from HP Inc., HP Incorporated, and is the head of services for Middle East, KSA, Turkey, and East Africa. And episode 107, Dave Greenberg. He was the crew member and then the manager of the operation of a rescue helicopter and medical planes. He's got a business called Emergency Preparedness. And of late, Dave has been working as part of one of the members of the New Zealand COVID response team, and some wonderful things that he and the team have done. And so when we go through this mashup, normally I'm asking the guests, the show is called Leadership is Changing. What does that mean to you? I've done that for Barbara and Bengu. For Dave, I've started a little bit earlier on in that episode because he shares some things that he's done with the COVID response team in New Zealand and around leadership as well. So, team, listeners, sit back, relax, enjoy this episode. Make sure you take notes. But other than that, here is the mashup. Hey, the show here is called Leadership is Changing. And when I say that statement or the title of the show, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, that's such an important topic anytime, especially now. I feel like for me, that means that I need to be in tune with what is changing. And not only what is changing, but how am I going to respond to those changes? Because if I wait and do nothing, I'm not meeting the need and demand out there. There's a term I've been hearing more often, and it's called cognitive flexibility. And it's the ability to be flexible to the change, what you're thinking about, how you're thinking about it, and even what you think about it. In other words, it's the ability to change your mind, but also your approaches. And cognitive flexibility is required in many, many ways throughout the workday and in leadership.
Yep. Okay. So it's really important. I mean, the brain is so powerful, and then the brain is also so important in the sense that we as leaders, we've all got brains, and so we need to use them, but also understand where we're at with things at times. And I like what you say there in relation to actually the way that we respond to change and the way we do it. Because, Barbara, what I talk about is that, there is a lot of things that are happening in change and it's out of our control, but there are two things that are in our control. One is our attitude and the way we react to it. So that's what you're talking about. And number two would be where we are going next. And I think they're really important things for us to talk about. So I really like what you just shared there.
Yes, and what they found is leaders who do exhibit this cognitive flexibility strength, they can handle those transitions more easily. Not that they're easy, but they can move through them. They can shift between tasks a little bit more in stride and apply learning in one area for greater problem solving.
And would they also be able to, there's that word out there, adapt, pivot, whatever you want to call it, are they able to do that quicker than others?
Yes, and they have a different view, and so they can apply this to decision making and as well as communication within a team, but also transfer those skills and help them become more aware of how to be more flexible.
Okay, that's great to know. So the show is called Leadership is Changing. When I say that title, what does that mean for you?
Yeah, I think certain aspects of leadership is not changing, but certain aspects are. If I take example, clarity, leading with purpose, setting the vision, energizing the teams, and respect above and beyond all is not changing. Having an empathy for people is not changing. They are the values which need to last over the decades, over any generation. But what is changing is technology, environment, and acceleration of everything at a global scale and much faster. And like anything else around us, leadership has not only to change and adapt, but has to be the energizer of the change. I see also a lot of digital changes around us impacting. Fluidity of talent is another important aspect. Different generations value different things, have diverse perspectives, which is a great thing, but also a number of years they would want to stay in the job, in the company. The way things also inspire them are different. Diversity is super important, but also you can say you are diverse, but if you are not necessarily including the diverse opinions, it doesn't mean alone anything else. Also, I think we need to embrace the culture around managing with during the time of ambiguity, and we need to accept the fact that we will learn by failing. We can't have an environment which is not safe to fail and expect innovation out of it. So we need to have a growth mindset and have patience to fail fast, learn fast, rapid prototype, and also give the license for people to fail, beginning with you.
License, wow. So I love that. I mean, the thing is, you're talking about diversity and inclusion, and wow. I remember in Hewlett Packard days when you and I were there working together, even though we're in different countries and so forth, and I remember they swapped those two words around and they went to more inclusion and diversity because that's where the focus needed to be, which is one thing. But I love what you're just saying here, that we learn by failing. And I think that's where, as you're saying, where innovation happens. And so fail fast, learn fast, but then have a license to fail. And I think that is awesome, having a license to fail. And I mean, when you say a license to fail, what do you mean by that? Just can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, in today's changing world, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results will never bring the differentiation or exceptionally improved result. only thing you can do is think of creative ways as a team. And there's no stupid idea, of course. And we are so different from each other. And if you have a team with diverse background, with diverse education, and with diverse skill in the previous jobs, they can bring tremendous ideas. If you don't discount and if you take a look at what is the risk of doing it, but also you need to look at what is the risk of not doing it. And when you look at also certain articles and interviews with the people on the deathbed, people are not talking about not working longer hours or not making every day the same routine, but being afraid of change at the time it mattered the most. So you need to be responsible for your own destiny and team's destiny, like a basketball game maker. You need to decide what are the things we will risk doing, what are the things the risk is really too high and too hypothetical and won't bring the results. Because it's the critical thinking that you need to evolve as a team by taking risk and also generate your future successes. Otherwise, doing the same thing will lose the passion. Everyone will become like government offices, which I have full respect, but day in, day out, repetitive task in the ever changing world is becoming robotics and automation candidates. Nobody wants to do a job which is not exciting, which is repetitive, and which is bound to become boring.
Yeah. Wow, fantastic. Being afraid of change when it matters the most, and decide as a change maker what risks you should take. I think listeners, Bengu's sharing with us some fantastic things here, and that's brilliant. Yeah, and New Zealand, just for our listeners, I mean, to understand, and that we went hard right at the beginning for lockdowns last year and so forth, and we've been able to manage it and doing really well. And yes, there's been one sort of second sort of little outbreak, but we could manage that. And now there's sort of been some tinkering of a couple of things. But, we tend to we're on top of things compared to other countries like Europe and the US and other countries. New Zealand is, as you said, as I said in the introduction, it's about, one of the best in the world and how it's handled COVID. What's it like being part of that team? What's it like being part of a team that's really doing well and making sure that the country and its people are safe?
Well, response is my life. I live for response. So I love the chaos of response. I love being amongst it. I love being able to think things differently than a lot of people when chaos strikes. But one of the differences, all my family's back in the States. When we shut down the country apart, schools in the August resurgence, and it made world news that New Zealand had one case and we were shutting down schools. I got a text from my niece in New York saying, one case, we've got thousands and we're opening up school next month. We've just handled it differently, and being part of that team, and it's a huge team effort. It's not me, it's not Ashley. There's thousands of people who are keeping New Zealand safe and some really good decisions being made. But I describe this, and it's a lot like my rescues. We're building the airplane as we're flying. And
sure.
there is no playbook for COVID, as the world knows. So we try things, some work, some don't, reset, but every failure, I love the quotes around failures aren't failure. They're just a new way not to do it next time. And that's what we have to do constantly.
Yeah, so try and assess. And if it does work, great. If it doesn't work, reset. Yeah, okay, that's good. Fail, reset. I'm writing notes here. And listeners, I hope you're writing notes as well, because what Dave Greenberg's sharing with us is some fantastic stuff here. Dave, the title of the show is Leadership is Changing. When I say that title, what does that mean to you?
For me, it was about putting my dreams on hold. I was, as you said, starting a professional speaking career. My training, this was going to be my best year ever, money-wise, and also living the life I wanted to, or 2020 was. And all of a sudden it stopped. And then I was sitting there like a lot of people going, what in the heck am I going to do? And then this opportunity to go to Ministry of Health came up. And that's what I was talking about that you mentioned in the intro. I've been a very lucky person, but I think all the things I've done before now and the people I've met and the relationships I've made create my luck. And then there's also the seeing opportunities and grabbing them, even if you're not sure, which is how I ended up in New Zealand 31 years ago.
Yeah. And I think, Dave, there's a formula that I talk about, and others have, talked to me about it as well, is that opportunity plus preparedness equals luck. Yeah. And so what you said before about you being prepared over the years and things that you've done, and then opportunities come along, when they come together, that's a beautiful thing, and that's what we can call as luck.
Yep, and I guess just the name of my company, Emergency Preparedness. I've been doing my whole life waiting for these days. There's a great clip on The Simpsons, if someone goes to YouTube, about Simpsons Peanut Factory, and it's about the manager of a peanut factory that's been preparing his people every day for the day an elephant escapes. And all of a sudden an elephant is running through Springfield. I am that manager.
No, well done. Yeah, cool. Hey, listeners, I hope you really enjoyed that mashup with our three guests there, Barbara, Bengu, and Dave, who shared some wonderful insights and wisdom in relation to leadership and what they've been doing in the past and doing today. And so I hope you took lots of notes in relation to that. Once again, if you haven't already checked out the Facebook group or the LinkedIn page, go ahead and do that. Love to see you on those platforms. And the title of that group or that page is Leadership is Changing. And also, very soon, I'm probably going to make an announcement in relation to this, but T-shirts are coming out. And so just look out for some announcements in relation to that around Leadership is Changing podcast and T-shirts. So yeah, just watch for that announcement. Hey, listeners, what we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Change is incredibly scary, especially with the unknown and the unfamiliar territory. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing. Look out for the episodes as they're being released. Download them, have a listen, put a review, and a rating. Please feel free to share them with your friends, your family, your network. Hey, if there's any feedback you'd like to give me about the show, or if there's a question you have for me when I'm interviewing my guests, or you have a question for the Ask Denis Freestyle episode, then send me an email, dennis@leadingchangepartners.com. Listeners, thanks for tuning in. It's always a pleasure coming to you. Until next time, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Denis Giannoutsas. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.